March 20th, 2024, Mary Conley in Jacksonville. I've been thinking this morning, this is going to be like 3 or 4 parts, maybe 5 parts, like Ken Main. I'm thinking about that Volkswagen at Jeb Stewart in 1967 in June. The bumper was solid chrome. It didn't have that black strip that you'll see in the 70s. It was solid chrome. There were no seat belts to my knowledge because I was moving around freely in the back seat. There was a little guitar pick looking white plastic. The seats were naga hide. They were not tall. They didn't have the special thing to keep your head from getting whiplash headrests. They didn't have that. They were flat and they were not tall. The steering wheel was very large. It went to its knees. I noticed that. I could go over the ride. You can look at some of my other tapes. I did notice this, and Mrs. Kathy McKesney would notice and think this is pretty good. The little red T-shirt that I had with the white trim, that was purchased in Daytona. I know specifically I got a surfer shirt. And I'm not a parent, but I imagine a 12-year-old and a 13 or 14-year-old's arms and chest are such that they probably wouldn't wear from year to year, year over year, especially a developing teenage girl. So I was 12 years, 9 months. And that's another thing is people put a lot of stuff and say, why didn't you do this? And why didn't you do that? We were 12 years and 9 months. Debbie was a lead in the friendship. Debbie would test Strambrui. We would sneak out at night occasionally. One time we snuck out and took my 63 Bel Air all the way to the beach by pushing it into the road and starting it in the street. Like the girl said in the tape at Lake Samantha, see what kind of trouble you can get into. The streets were filled with drugs. There were yellow jackets, red beanies. I didn't do drugs. I didn't even do pot. Occasionally, I'd take a sip of liquor. If they had a New Year's Eve party and left liquor in their glasses, I went and sampled a lot of, or even ran into a tree walked right into a tree. But where did you get the liquor? Well, there were leftover liquors in the kitchen glasses. Debbie and I would do things. We ate a bottle of hot peppers one time. We'd take a hot pepper, I'd take a hot pepper, not super hot peppers. Debbie would get on a guy's motorcycle. She didn't know where the brakes were. She had to basically slow it down and crash it into the hill because in Cedar Hills, some of the yards had higher mounds. You know, they would go up. And she basically turned it over in there. She had a 16th birthday party. A guy knockered up in the bathtub chilling out. Not in water, but just he was out. There were Battle of the Bands, Leonard Skinner. Leonard Skinner was down. Kevin Elson's house was right there. And we'd go down and sit with the boys and watch sneaking out. Watch Creature Feature with Gary Rossinger and Steve Gaines. We sat there. They were young. They were a novice band at that time. They would have like something at over there at Harlow. I forget what was a club. But here's another thing. As I'm going, let's say there's 150,000 young college students that have done dissertations. Some of them are good and they've done psychological dissertations, but a lot of them just go over the same story over and over again. And my IQ runs a gamut from 122 to 133. I took an offline Mensa. It was like 148, but in the Burnett, it's 133. My general technical in the Army, so that cuts off Mr. Brown. He don't want to hear about Army stuff. But anyway, it was 133 also. So generally speaking, I would have 133. But even if at times it's 122 or 125, that's higher than the general population. So I look at the world and say, well, BS. No, we were little kids. But what I was going to say about that surfer shirt is, after the encounter, which I thought, my God, what a strange fluke, very, very dangerous. But Debbie said, don't write it in your diary. Your mom will read your diary. We'll get in big trouble. He displayed a gun, and we were hitchhiking. I wasn't really hitchhiking. Debbie was not moving from the bleachers. I wanted to go home, possibly because I knew we were going to Daytona next week. I wanted to go home And it was midday, and I could be with my mom, help her make dinner, watch the midday shows. There were game shows, What's Behind the Third Door, Monty, somebody, and we'd watch the game shows. We might watch I Love Lucy. And band practice, or the band class, was a 6-week course, and it probably was only 2 or 3 days, maybe 3 days a week. There could have been a break period. And we'd eat Fritos or Lance crackers or something, the little candies that had stripes on them. It had peanut filling. But there might have been a break, because if you're talking about something that's 2 or 3 hours, they might have had a bathroom break or something. We were in a little cubicle by the gym called the band shell. And the teacher's name was something like Janet Russell. And I had a clarinet, a Bundy clarinet. Oh, and the reason I think he came down from a pseudo-sexual thing he was going into at La Moya and Wesconet is because, one, I talk sometimes like cost. They'll notice a touch of Philadelphia. My mom was from Philadelphia. Mrs. Davis, Kathleen's mom, her best friend, was from Bedford-Sturdivant, New York. So even though I've been born and bred and raised from Pensacola to Jacksonville in the South, sometimes you can pick up some things. That may have been like, wow, he might have in his brain, some different part of his brain saying, that girl's talking like she's from the North, And secondly, when he pulled the gun at La Moya and Wesconet, I said something like, what is your name? What's your name? And he said, Theodore. I said it quietly because Debbie wasn't talking anymore. And I said, Theodore, because it's so pretentious. And then I said, well, what is your last name? And he said, Bundy. And I said, your name is Bundy like my clarinet, and your gun is silver like Debbie's flute. Well, that's another stream of consciousness. It could have sent his mind in a different, because the brain picks up this and that. And then I said, Debbie's father's an admiral. Well, now you're talking humor because there are only 5 or 6 admirals. But Mrs. Sexton, Hogue, Hogue, would always say, my husband's a CO. He's a CO and y'all are just E's or something, My father was ADC, Chief Petty Officer. But see, hers was a CO, commanding officer. But I took that to mean he must be something way up because he was down in NASA. He worked at NASA. I said, Debbie's father's an admiral. He works at NASA. You ought to meet Vicki and Jeannie. Her sisters, they're older. They're already out on their own. If you're looking for girls, why don't you go to the high school? Because Forest High School was down 103rd, which wasn't really that far away. But anyway, however it happened, he came down from wherever he was. The gun disappeared. He was wearing khaki shorts. He was not where he was supposed to be. There were books in the back. One of the books seemed to be a concordant of Chinese and English. It was split down the middle and it had what I thought in my mind, look at these hieroglyphics, And I put it away. I had to move those out of my way. I'm a real busybody. My IQ's high. Skinny as a rail, too. I've got a picture I could show you of August of 1967 where I'm standing with my grandmother and 2 aunts at Mayport. I think the whole family had come down. So that's what I'm thinking my dad did. He usually took 2 weeks. I think we spent a week in Daytona at the Rip Van Winkle, and then later that summer in August, his family came and visited. And took some more days off. So see, he split his vacation to one, take us to Daytona, and then that's where I got that little red shirt with the white piping. Debbie was wearing a white peasant top, and she had like Hager jeans on, Wrangler jeans that she had frayed, possibly sandals. I don't know what her problem was. I wanted to go home. So she talks to this guy, the red VW, and she says, get in. And I'm like, what? We're just pretending. I said, it's just pretend. We're just pretending. And thank God I got in. I mean, it's terrible to say that, to get in the car with Theodore Bundy, who was 20 years 7 months. Debbie was 12 years 7 months. I was 12 years 9 months. Anyway, we got in, And he let us off at Harlow and Blanding. He said his name. And then they got some nuts and said, he's Ted. He wasn't Ted till he started acting sophisticated. He was Theodore then. He said Theodore. And then I've got Kevin and others that say, I don't know why he was here. Matt DeLisi is a professor of Iowa. These people traveled. Even William Hagmeyer said they were quite transient. Hell's bells, he's probably a lot more transient than y'all know. You've got energy and you're hyper. Let's say he has some manic activity. It's only 3 days across the country. Look at Koberger. Just fly like a bat out of hell. 2.5 days later, he's in Pennsylvania. And through snow and semis and everything. They don't care. Anyway, this is part 1. Thank you. There are things. I also found a lot of evidence, Mr. Deckel, as late as it is, 56, 58 years, whatever it is. I found evidence of his trip in Jacksonville, which placed him at the Roller Dome on Cassett, the Evangel Church on Ramona, looking for food and work, and possibly on Normandy near the cemetery, which reminds me of, in that cemetery, you know how we have white sand everywhere? If you dig, we don't have good topsoil here. It's like beach soil. You dig it's white sand. Well, according to rules and regulations, they have to bring clay in. So it's like German dirt. It's like a mixture of dirt and clay. And they would have mounds of it. And my parents are buried there, and Mr. and Mrs. Davis are buried there. And my brother is buried there. And Leonard Skinner one of them members used to be buried there, but they had to move his grave, I believe. Anyway, they would have mounds of that dirt. And there's a story where a girl named Brenda Matthews was at a convenience store or grocery store and got hungry, and she had an Oldsmobile, a red and white Oldsmobile, possibly a Cougar. And it was dark. She said it wasn't well lit, and it was at nighttime. And she went in and got her stuff, whatever she wanted to buy. And she had long hair, dark, slender, parted in the middle. And she comes out, and there's this dirty white van with the back door open. And she was some raised the shackles on her. And she said as she went by, she kicked the back door shut and then got in her Cougar and left. All right. I'm out, over and out for now. I found out a lot of things, which I think are significant. I also believe he could have killed Virginia Helms, but that's a whole story, because he had learned to give his Chevron card to Liz Cloper the month before. He had given Liz his Chevron card to fill the tank up 2 times. I think he messed up her vehicle. I don't remember what it was, but he was driving from Seattle to Olympia. And for some reason, he wanted to use her car, and he let her use his car. And this is a month after the double killings in Lake Sammamish. Now, a person that's just done something like that would be tight of the vest, but he was always learning stuff. So he learned a lot about credit, more than most people. My parents didn't even have nothing to do with credit. You know, there was installment loans. You just had an installment loan in your mortgage. All right. Thank you.